Hello everyone, and welcome back to Revit Snippets. Great tips you can learn in just a few minutes.
This video is sponsored by Tagitize, the easiest way to run Tag All on multiple Revit views and sheets. Also, say goodbye to overlapping tags. Tagitize will turn this into this. Try Tagitize completely for free using the link in this video's description. Do you need to tag several air terminals in your HVAC drawing without cluttering up your Revit view? A common practice is to tag identical diffusers with the same flows only once using a typical tag. For example, I have in this space 4 air terminals with the same flow. Instead of placing 4 different tags in this already condensed drawing, I can place this one single typical tag which says clearly that it represents all 4 diffusers in this space. This is very simple to do. I can either do it manually like this by creating a new tag, and then, based on my assessment of the space, type in here the number of identical items this text should represent. Or, if I'm not fancy doing that manually, I can just undo the text and then use some automation to generate typical tags for all spaces in one single click. Let me show you now both methods so you can choose for yourself which one to apply to make your MEP drawings a lot cleaner even after tagging.
By the way, if you are new to this channel, make sure to subscribe now because we do tutorials like this every single week. Okay, let's begin.
First thing first, let's create a new family for our new typical tag. I will go to New Family and then in my folder, make sure that I can find and select the metric generic tag template. With that selected, let's open this. Because this family is generic, the first thing we have to specify is which Revit category this tag should reference. I will change the selection here to air terminals and then select OK. We can now delete this placeholder text box and start creating our labels. The first label to place will be for airflow. This is important because we can only use typical text for truly identical air terminals, and that means they have to have the same airflow. Luckily, flow is already a parameter available here, so I can just select it, add it to the right, and click Finish. So up until now, this is just a normal diffuser tag. Next, we need to make it typical by adding a new label for the typical elements count. For example, in a space with 4 identical terminals, this label should show the number 4 so the reader can know how many elements it represents. This is not something that's supported out of the box, so we need to create a new shared parameter for this purpose. I would create this in the test parameter group. Now I already have in here another parameter from testing earlier. It's called typical count. So for the new parameter, I will call it a bit differently, maybe typical number. Now this is important. This parameter has to be of type integer because it is meant to show the count of air terminals in the space. Once I've done that, I should save the parameter to the shape parameter file. And then make sure to select the same one and add it to the label selection window. Once used inside the project, this will only show a number from 1 to infinity. So let's add to here as well a prefix just to make things clear. Then I'll set a sample value to any number, maybe 99, just so it displays more realistically in this family. Now, we only need to make sure the text boxes don't overlap, and then load this family into our Revit file. I can then test the new family right away by placing it on this diffuser here. You can see it's showing the right flow for that air terminal. However, the typical count field is still empty. At this point, I still cannot change its value in here yet because the question mark here is not editable. To edit it, we need to also add the same new shared parameter to this project model. This is also straightforward to do. Let's go to Project Parameters. Select the same parameter we created earlier. And then make sure to apply this to the air terminal category in this file. After saving that edit, I can select the air terminal and see straight away this new typical number parameter that we just added under its properties. If I change the value here, the tag will update to show the same thing. I can also select the tag and then click the number here to change it directly. So you can use either method to update this value. However, this means I still need to manually check the space and then count the number of identical air terminals myself. This can be tricky if the elements don't already have the same airflow. Then I would need to place a tag myself and then change the typical count value either in the properties of the element or in the tag. To me, this is way too manual, especially on a big project. Well, this is exactly why I normally don't do it manually this way. Instead, what I use is an automated solution that generates these typical tags for me using the right typical element count and the correct tag family type. It's a little clever Revit plugin called Tagitize, which you can try for free using the link in this video description. Here, under the plugin settings, we can specify how we want to tag any Revit category. For now, let's focus on only air terminals. There are lots of settings here you can tweak, but let's focus on defining the Revit tag type for typical tags here. As you can see, I have set this up for the previous test run, so we need to update it. For the typical count parameter, let me change it from typical count to the new one we added earlier, which is typical number. On the row above, we can select the parameter the plugin will use to put diffuser elements into typical groups. Here I have selected flow, which is telling Tagitize that elements in the same typical group need to have not only the same family and the same type, but also the same airflow value. This is still what needs to happen, so let's leave it the same like this. Finally, let's update the typical tag family the plugin will use. It's no longer this old value, so let's select the new tag family we created together a few minutes ago. With the settings now updated and ready to go, let's just save it and then run the tag current view by space command to regenerate our typical tags. This is the command I use the most because elements will be grouped first by the space that contains them. Then they will be subgrouped by our typical host criteria, which are same family, same type, and same flow. And there we go. We have now a nice summary of all the tags the plugin has generated. If you want to inspect them one by one, this is a good way to do that. For now, let's just see the space we checked earlier. As you can see, Tagitize has correctly counted the number of identical air terminals in each space. It then tagged one of those elements and then updated the element's property so that the tag will show the right number of diffusers. So all the things that I did manually earlier have been automated. If we look at a bigger space, like this one here, this tag is the same for all three elements along this line. You can see the plugin has updated the typical number value for all the diffusers in this typical group. The same was done for these other typical groups as well. However, what I don't like is that the group of blue air terminals here has only one tag for all 28 elements. This can make it difficult for someone reading this later to understand where all of those 28 air terminals are, so it might end up being confusing. Luckily, since we have Tagitize, it's super easy to regenerate these tags so we can have smaller typical groups with fewer elements in each one. If I now go back in settings and return to the screen we saw earlier, there's a slider down here to control the max grouping distance the plugin will use when forming typical groups. Last time we used 15 meters, so now let's reduce this value to maybe only 5. I can now run the tagging command again. And after a few seconds, we get a list of more tags than earlier. Checking the space again, what we did has been successful in breaking down the previous massive blue terminal group into 3 smaller ones. Now, we have all air terminals along this top row in one group of 7. Then we have the 2 middle rows here in the second group of 14 diffusers. And then, of course, the last group contains the 7 other blue air terminals along the bottom row. That's brilliant! Now, the good thing about this plugin is it doesn't limit you to just tagging diffusers. If I now return to the settings window, I can choose to tag ducts instead of air terminals. Let's run the tag elements in space command again, as it's my favorite. And there we go. All the duct tags have been generated for me as well and placed in this view in such a clean and tidy layout. Now, some shorter ducts didn't get tagged, but it's only because I have a filter set up in the settings of the plugin to exclude very short duct segments. If you want to tag every single duct, simply don't use that filter. And there you have it. 2 different ways to create typical tags for identical air terminals in your Revit MEP drawing. Feel free to pick whichever one is suitable for you. If you like the automated solution, make sure to check this video's description to try Tagitize completely for free.
If you like this lesson and want more like this every single week, make sure to subscribe to this channel now. For now, have a good day and I'll see you in the next tutorial.